Hello folks, so we are up here on Air Disaster Hill, which is where an incredible percentage of the Australian government and military died at the start of World War II, particularly August 1940. We'll talk a bit more about what's up here, but I will bring in the rest of the team. So we are joined by Chris from the History of Everything channel.
G'day.
Hello, I'm
And
Rob.
of course. Chris, now folks, Chris does have his own microphone.
I do, yes.
Chris,
I'm here.
can you tell us about your channel?
Okay, so I don't have a podcast. We'll start with that. But no, I cover pretty much everything from... I got big on the Soviet Navy and the Russian Navy, but I do cover a bit of everything, particularly how nation states get built. Right now I'm doing a whole month dedicated to steam engines or trains in general because that's what the patrons wanted, so that's what the patrons are getting.
I mean, this is autistic people stuff, isn't it?
It really is.
And I'm guessing everyone in here is on the spectrum in most of our audience, so, you know, it's fine.
Well, I'm not diagnosed, but
What's the
I
point?
keep getting told I should be, particularly by half my audience. So there is something to be said about that.
I think the thing that I've always thought is, one, there is no treatment, and two, you get disqualified from driving in Queensland. So
Not anymore.
Oh, really? They've
Not
taken
anymore.
that away?
Yeah, they've taken that away.
Oh, great. Anyway,
Yeah.
there's still real prejudice. So, yeah. Anyway, moving on.
Your website, your YouTube channel.
Yes. So the handle is @History of Everything channel. I'll send you the links. I'm sure you can flash something on screen. But you know, we're actually, turns out we both live really close to each other, which who'd have thouut?
Well, it was funny because we were at Oz Armour Fest, and you said I live in Canberra, and I was like, wait a minute, I live in Canberra.
It's just we had to travel 2,300 kilometres to figure that out.
Anyway, we do try and encourage local creators, although we should note you are probably about 1,000 times bigger than we are. So
I've just
maybe
over
100 times bigger.
110,000 subs.
Yeah.
So
We're here at Air Disaster Hill, which is the hill actually between our two areas where we live. So and we've come up here in order to, on a bright, beautiful Canberra sunny Sunday morning, and we're going to talk about the history of this place, as well as your site and some other your other thoughts about tanks as well as steamships. And
I'm going to really upset people when I say what my favourite tank is.
yeah, all right.
We cannot wait.
Well, favourite 3 tanks. There are 3 of them.
Okay, so firstly, we're on Air Disaster Hill. You are the History of Everything guy. Do you want to quickly walk us through what's going on up here?
So, set a bit of backstage first. Australia in 1939 is in a complete state. I don't think I need to overstate how much of a state we're in. By 1940, pretty much the cream of our army was in North Africa, including my great uncle. He was there, actually. I've got his medals at home. Fantastic story from him as well. I'll cover that eventually. But most of our armies in North Africa. The best of our navy, which even then couldn't stand up to Japan because it's so much bigger, is in the Mediterranean. And then most of our air force, if you could really call it much of an air force at the time, is also in North Africa. So when Japan comes knocking in about 1940 towards China, getting further and further south, and then in 1941, of course, we all know what happened, we're kind of in a bit of a state, and you have the whole country scrambling to build a defence under Prime Minister Menzies, who, it must be said, was not popular with the military at the time. He rocks up on a cruiser in the Mediterranean at one point, and the whole crew has to be stopped from shouting at him because they hate him so much. I believe that was HMAS Sydney, but it could have been Perth. I'm not 100% off the top of
Those
my
are the
head.
glory days of the Australian military, where the rank and file would shout at the higher-ups.
Oh, the best part was after the Sydney sank the Italian cruiser Bartolomeo Colodi, because alcohol was forbidden in the Australian Navy because we kind of,
Problems.
maybe arrested our governor and overthrew the entire colony in a mutiny because they stopped us trying to use rum as currency back in the 1800s. Poor Bligh. Had to be him. Alcohol was completely banned in the Australian Navy. So when the Australian cruiser Sydney went on a 2v1 fight with 2 Italian cruisers that were faster than it, and one, sinking one of them, crippling another, they got given extra butter. Under order of the Prime Minister, who then rocked up and was really happy about it. So naturally the crew wasn't very happy and spent the entire week sneaking off to the British ships that were tied up next to them.
I was going to say, the British destroyers that were part of that battle would have been breaking out the rum tots. So
They parked the destroyers next to the Sydney and put bridges across them. And then the officers just turned around and went, yeah, we don't want a mutiny, let's just go fun. But getting onto that point, Australia's running around really, really desperately trying to build itself up. Most of our Air Force at the time, I believe, was P-40s and really early Spitfires and Hurricane. I don't know if we used the Hurricane, actually.
Spitfires came a bit later as well.
Yeah,
I think.
Spitfires were a bit later, but it was we were starting to get P-40s and such.
And a huge number of pilots in Bomber Command. But
and we had a lot of experience from fighting in the European theatre. There were Gloucester Gladiators there too, which, a Gloucester Gladiator is not going to do anything against a Zero, but we ignore that. Most of the tanks in the Australian military were really, really shoddy, like second-hand British ones that we sort of just had laying around, like Vickers ones from the interwar years.
Captured Italian ones.
Which, let's put an L3 against a Hargo and see what happens. That would be interesting, actually.
Or the Chiha is underrated, but yes.
It is. I'm very curious to see what would happen. That's a story for another time. And the Navy, well, we've lost a cruiser by this point, the Sydney, and it's basically 2 heavy cruisers and 3 light cruisers, and that's it. And a bunch of destroyers and smaller ships. Not enough to stop Japan. So all of the ministers are travelling back and forward around the country to build up local productions. We start building 60 Bathurst-class corvettes, the Boomerang fighter, the Wirrawee, that kind of aircraft, the Woomera, those kind of aircraft are all being built. And of course the Sentinel tank, which I'm sure we'll get into later. They're all starting to be built in Australia. But to do that, you have to travel to the capital to organise with Parliament. And because Australia is Australia, when we federated into a country, we couldn't agree on where to put the capital. Some wanted it in Sydney because it was first, some wanted it in Melbourne because it was richer and bigger. So we put one in the middle, because that's what you do, apparently. When you look at it militarily, it actually makes a lot of sense, because invading Canberra would be the worst thing in the world to have to do as a foreign invader, let alone getting into Australia in the first place. You'd get over the mountain ranges and then the bush.
Look, it's a twin-edged sword. Being a long way away from anywhere isn't an ideal thing about a capital, but it does make invasion harder.
It does, yes. If the Japanese got here, put it that way, just give it up. They deserve it at that point. They put in the hard yards.
We do still have the bolt holes on the road to the coast that were built to hold the explosives to blow the road.
Yeah, and it's filled with Winnie the Pooh now. Pooh's Corner, So one of those days, a bunch of ministers for the Menzies government and quite high-ranking members of the Australian Defence Force at the time were flying into Canberra on a Hudson bomber when it decided to not fly anymore. And
which the Hudsons chose to do on
Hudsons did that a lot.
They killed Emilio Earhart in an Electra, which is basically the same thing. They killed the guy who invented insulin. They killed about 20 trainees in one day in Canada.
I want to know who built them.
Well, Lockheed.
I mean, like the person at Lockheed, I
think it was an early Heinemann even, but like one of his first ones. But the other thing with the Hudson, in its defence, it was designed for commercial airline pilots who had to have, I think, 1,000 hours of flight experience before they were allowed at the controls, and putting military pilots with maybe 100 hours.
Especially in a time of war.
It led to it creating a lot more crashes than possibly it deserved. It did have some advanced features, but
And with the Canberra one, effectively, my understanding what happened, you feel free to correct me, it came into land in Canberra. It's possible that an officer with a bigwig decided, I want to fly the plane because I know how to fly planes.
Not an officer, the Minister for Air.
Yeah, the Minister for Air, that's it. Yeah, the Minister for Air.
Who had been a single-engine fighter pilot in World War I and thought he was a mad hot flyer.
Which is very different to a Hudson bomber, which I'm sure you're putting on screen now. It's either rumoured he did that or the Hudson just decided to stall, which it's known to do. And either way, it came down hard about where we're standing now, where the wing is laid out behind us in the memorial. And everyone on board was, for lack of a better term, turned into really, really crispy former humans.
Yeah, I'm just going to put up on the screen now. It's quite macabre that the Australian War Memorial has retained the charred brass that they cut off the Chief of the Army.
Yes.
And including bits of molten aluminium from the melted Hudson. So, but anyway, we don't put it on display, but they've got them.
Yeah, but it's so underrated because it completely collapses the Menzies government, the first one. Menzies comes back later, but that's a post-war thing.
A whole other thing.
That's a post-war thing that gets into a whole ream of politics then.
He did become Australia's longest-serving Prime Minister in his second coming, but yes.
Yeah, and he's got
three ministers dying. Basically, many of his cabinet fell apart, and when he came to the next election, he was gone.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, it did lead to something pretty good, though, in Australia in a weird sort of way, because we got one of the best prime ministers we ever had for the situation. Because Curtin, love him or hate him, politically, whatever you believe in, he did a phenomenal job in battling Winston Churchill, which is now mostly forgotten. Because he spends half of the first half of his prime ministerialship fighting Winston Churchill constantly and then giving him the finger and just recalling all of Australia's forces from North Africa, which gives us something to defend the northeast of Australia with when the Japanese finally come.
True. Anyway, that's the air disaster. We're standing on the spot of it, so I thought that would be well worth addressing. And I would also say it ripped the guts out of the top brass of the army in particular. It led to having to recall Blamey from retirement and ended up having to make him a field marshal to talk to MacArthur. And I think even Blamey would admit it would have been better if Brudenell White had not died on this hill.
I've actually been reading a biography of Blamey. It's only just come out. I can send you a link of it. It's really, really well written. I used to have a very low opinion of Blamey. I used to think he was just like a poor old man's imitation of Sir John Monash.
He was a brilliant staff officer, Monash.
Yeah, he was. But the more I read about Blamey, and yes, this biography is very biased in favour of him, but I've gone and I've read others since then who are very critical of him. I have a much higher level of respect for Blamey now, and I want to do a video on him eventually. I intend to do a big biography on him. I might do it next month because it's my birthday month. I'll do what I want. And the more I understand the man, the more I realise he was put into an impossible situation against MacArthur, who the more less said about him, the better in that situation when it comes to politics, against the whole of the US military trying to force Australia into a corner to behave as a child. And also at the same time having to deal with the fact that they had next to no equipment, next to nothing being built. And he had inherited, like you said, a completely gutted command structure. So,
and he was too old.
And he was too old.
By anyone's admission, he was too old.
His own admission, he's too old. And yeah, he's a very flawed man. He's probably spent more time in the red light district of Melbourne than any other person in history.
Did he own one of the brothels?
I think he might have.
Yeah.
I don't remember. He spent So one of the reasons people hate Blamey so much is because the officer class didn't like him. Because in the First World War, the officer class, no matter how pious they present themselves, they all had courtesans. They all had ladies of the French knight who they had their favourites. They were all very high class ones, though, very fancy ones. They had great shoes, basically.
I mean, not Monash. He was into the old girls.
Yes, but they were the high class old girls.
Yeah.
But Blamey didn't care. And he'd just go to the local brothel that the soldiers went to because he's like,
that's a bad move being seen with the troops, though, isn't it?
And that's what it did. He was seen with the troops. But Blamey's whole, why not? Let's go for it. And then he gets caught, of course, in a police car with a prostitute's mouth on an appendage. And that kind of gives him a really bad reputation politically, which is why part of the reason no one wanted him in charge. But to his credit, he was actually pretty good. For what we needed at the time and what we got, he did all right. And I don't think there's much more you can say for being thrown into an impossible situation like that.
I think as the counterfactual, if this plane had not gone down on this spot, the Australian military would have been in a better state.
It would have.
Whether retaining the Menzies government would have been good or bad, that's very hard to
We would have still been leaning towards the UK rather than the US as our political...
I think by the time this happened, August 1940, I think even Menzies was aware the British Empire was dead in the water.
Yeah.
The corpse was still moving, but the heart had been ripped out.
That's the hard bit, though, because you have to wonder, because we go so far into counterfactual with this, because if Menzies doesn't do what Curtin does and doesn't fight Churchill, and by most accounts, Menzies was not strong enough to fight Churchill.
There's
those units don't come back.
There's stuff about Menzies trying to seize the British Prime Ministership. He was happy to fight Churchill, and Menzies won most of his battles in his life. So I don't know. Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, Curtin very much stands there, and there's a famous speech which I put it on the same kind of par as Churchill's "We Will Never Surrender" speech, where Curtin stands up in front of a gigantic crowd, and this is why I put it on par with Churchill's speech, because he stands up and does it live in front of a giant crowd in Sydney, and he says, "Every man, woman, or child, whether he or she likes it, is now at the service of the Commonwealth to defend the Commonwealth." And then the whole campaign of "Fight, Work, or Perish" comes out, and it is a massive swing into action, and it militarizes our whole society. And you just wonder if Menzies would have done that with all of his issues with party members. Because even though he lost his party here, it was really on the rocks before that. He writes about it a couple times, Menzies himself, saying the UAP was dying. It was just, this is what did it.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to know, what if, maybe this, maybe that. I mean, we can talk about Blamey, we can talk about the generals who went down here, but it really changes the course of Australian history and really Australian politics for the next, I want to say 80 or so years until now. We're only finally really breaking out of the US shadow post-Great War of Terror.
I guarantee you, we could approach 100 people in Canberra, possibly 1,000, and not one would be able to tell you this spot is here.
I'll raise you. There's 450,000 people standing behind me. I reckon we could go to half of them and they wouldn't have an idea.
Yeah.
It just,
but as a percentage, I mean, it's,
I mean, I guarantee most people just don't know it exists. And I mean, it's a 15-minute hike past an artillery firing range to get here, so it's not that out of the way, but still.
Yep. All right, let's turn our thoughts to tanks.
Yes.
First of all, we're doing this as part of our Centurion episode, so give us your thoughts on Centurion.
I love the Centurion.
Okay,
I think it's a great tank. I know there's a lot of argument around whether or not it's the first main battle tank. I'm not tanky enough to really know about that.
It was built as a heavy cruiser, but anyway.
But my understanding of it is, who gives a crap? It's built as a cruiser tank, like you said. It did its job. So what if it's a main battle tank? It did its job. The one thing I absolutely adore about it, the little annotate that I'm doing, and I've actually got a script that I need to buck up and hurry up and record, but tank nerds do scare me a little bit. But I've just dealt with train nerds, so
I've got to say, tank nerds, in our experience, and that's who we deal with, they're mostly pretty okay.
Yeah, but I have got a lot of Soviet tank nerds in the background screaming.
Okay.
There you go. But my favourite one is the Centurion that gets nuked.
Yeah, the nuclear tank. The
Then
atomic
it
tank.
goes back to war.
Yeah.
So
down, watch the radiation off it.
eyes it down, watch it off, send it to war.
the crew who got back in it did all die of cancer within a few years of that. So, yeah. Anyway.
The thing I want to know about it, after getting nuked, was its armour better?
Oh, hardened.
Yes. That's the question. That is the question we need answers
I think
for.
the difference between comic books and real life is that irradiating things doesn't make them better very often in real life.
Give it powers, maybe?
Yeah.
But hear me out. Like, it's a long-term weapon because you drive it through a town in North Korea. That whole town's not going to get irradiated. You got to think about
it. Yeah. Okay.
No, it does. That's not how it works.
No. Okay.
We went to Vietnam, not North Korea.
Was it Vietnam? I thought it was. Okay, Vietnam. Yeah. Okay, one of the two.
Yeah.
I mean, Centurions did go to Korea, but they went in British service.
That was it. Yeah. It's been a while since I wrote this script.
The boat that was bringing the Centurions to Australia got diverted to Korea.
That's it.
And then we got them after they'd gone to Korea.
That's the one. Yeah. But yeah, the nuke tank is one of the things I do want to cover.
The gate guard at Robertson Barracks up in Darwin.
I think it's been moved from Robertson.
Has it?
Yeah.
Has it?
Yeah.
Because the tanks have moved.
It's gone to, I think, RAF Edinburgh.
In South Australia?
Yep, because that's where they've put new armoured brigade headquarters down there, I guess.
Okay. It shows you how long ago I wrote that script.
Let me double check that because I was rereading the Centurion info.
I listened to a really good podcast about it the other day from two Australian guys. I was drinking some beers. And
Were these the two old blokes in Canberra?
The sound quality on that episode was appalling, though. Cool. All right.
Favourite tanks?
Yeah, tell us about these controversial favourite tanks.
Stand over here.
Okay.
The first one is the Mark IV Mal tank from World War One.
It's very successful.
I have reasons.
And in German service.
Yes, it was. But the reason it's one of my favourites is because, one, I'm a boat nerd. I got the boat flavour of brain. And it starts as His Majesty's Landship, which I think is the funniest thing ever. And for what they achieve and what they are, I think it's remarkable. Because what Monash does with them and what other generals start to do with them by combining arms and warfare, it completely changes the game. And one of my favourite little anecdotes about it is I read a biography about Sir John Monash a while back, and I think it was in 1909. It might have been 09, it might have been 1910. He was giving a lecture to an Australian class of young officers, and his exact words were, "We need larger vehicles armed with heavier weapons to use with the infantry to break through enemy lines, and that is how we will win future wars." And everyone laughed him out of the room. 15 years later, not even 15 years later, barely 10 years later, at Le Hamel, he does it. And he does it so well.
So he'd been waiting for them.
Yeah, it's like he does it so well that he completely shatters a German position, which was considered really almost impossible to take. And then he does it again and again. And I first got into that because my great-great-uncle actually died on the advance at Le Hamel.
Yeah, right.
He's buried at Villers-Bretonneux. And it made me read about the battle. And then I was like, why was this so successful when you read about things like Fromelles, you read about things like Verdun, the Somme, and they're so disturbing in the amount of casualties that they have.
Blame his staff work. There you go.
It's blaming staff work and Monash's planning. Yeah. And the fact that they played the politics with the king and with the British High Command so well that Americans agreed to put American soldiers under Australian command. And for an American to agree to put their soldiers under foreign command is almost unheard of. And the fact that it was some random guy from Australia who was, above all, a Prussian-born Jew, very scary. His parents were only in Australia for about 2 years. They migrated from Prussia and they were Jewish. So there was a lot to be said about a lot of anti-Semitism that Monash faced, and that's part of the reason he never got the promotion.
Particularly from the Murdoch family?
Particularly from
as in Rupert Murdoch, who was still a pain in the ass?
Yeah, and Charles Bean as well, the guy who founded the War Memorial, and he gave him hell for being a Jew. I believe at one point...
Also just not being tall and lantern-jawed. They want them to look Ben Robert Smith.
They want him to look Ben Robert Smith. But there is a quote from a Murdoch-owned newspaper at the time. you may have to censor this, where he's called nothing more than a dirty Hunnic Jew.
I think we can live with that.
Yeah.
In context.
In context.
We might get demonetized.
No, you shouldn't, because I'm talking about context. Speaking of, plane from the airport.
Yep.
But that's the way he's referred to, and yet he is arguably one of the most successful generals in history. And arguably one of. I said one of. There's a lot.
The British would say the Canadian Curry was up there with Monash and in Allied in...
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Monash and Curry were friends.
But two of the best generals in World War I puts you as two very, very good generals.
Like, Curry and Monash were so good that they are knighted at the same time. And by dint of the
fact that... On the battlefield.
Yeah, on the battlefield. By dint of the fact that M is after C, Monash is the last general to ever be knighted by a British monarch in the field. And that kind of tells you something.
And it was the first time the monarch had given out knighthoods in the field in 300 years, I think, since the Wars of Spanish Succession.
Yeah. And that tells you something about the reverence in which Curry and Monash held. And together, I wouldn't want to be a German if they're in the same vicinity. Yeah. And that's kind of why I like the Mark IV.
So that's the Mark IV. Now, Australia actually has a complete Mark IV sitting in the Trelaw Annex in Mitchell.
I know, I beated it.
And that's a real one.
Yeah.
Bovington only has a replica.
It does, yeah.
But
we also have an A7V, but that's a whole other story.
Well, that's in Brisbane.
Yes.
That's
where I'm from, so I've seen it a lot.
But it still strikes me as hilarious that the memorial refuses to pull it out of storage.
It was briefly, wasn't it? It was on display for a while.
In 2018, I think it came out for the centenary of those big battles. But anyway. What should or shouldn't be on display in the memorial is a much bigger fight than
There's
this podcast.
got a missile launcher for a Standard Missile one-off at Oliver Hazard Perry frigate. I want that on display, and I want to look at it every time it's on display.
You know that arm never worked, though.
Oh, no, it didn't. But it looked cool.
Yeah, it looked cool, but they could never make them work.
No, they couldn't.
That's why they went to tubes. No, tank number 2.
This one gets the German fans a little upset because I maintain it's the most effective Panzer of the war.
Is it a Stug?
It's the Panzer 38T.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. No. We're big fans of the PZ-38T.
I love the PZ-38T.
Ghost Division's tank.
Yeah. But a lot of people give it crap because it can't stand up against late war tanks. I think that's a stupid reason to give it crap because it's not built to do that.
Also, show me a 10-ton tank that can stand up against a 50-ton tank.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's built before the war by the Czechs, who, mind you, they do have a lot of industrial experience, but they're on the same level playing field, even less so than anyone else, because they don't have a lot of tank experience. They build a chassis that is so effective, it can later be upgraded to, be effectively the Hetzer. The Swedes use it as well. The Swiss used it up until like 1980. I think 1984 was when they got rid of it, maybe 83.
G13s.
Yeah, which is a variant of it. Show me a tank that is so effective, built by a minor power, and can do basically everything it needs to. And then when it finally gets outdated, it can be rebuilt into a vehicle that can then fight the big boys. Because, it's handicapped a bit, but the chassis can still do it. And do all of this on a shoestring budget, because it's Czechoslovakia, which is a country that didn't exist in its entity until after the First World War, that is breaking down economically because it's trying to build a country that is under constant political pressure from its neighbours, and yet it still spurns out this beautiful little thing that can do everything it needs to. And then the Germans love it so much because it actually works compared to half of their stuff, that they use it to wipe out Poland because it's the big tank in Poland.
And France,
then
basically.
France, it completely destroys the French. Like, yes, if it comes up against a Char B or a...
If the Char B's got fuel or the right sort of castor oil or...
Or if it comes up against one of the big Chars...
Communists.
Exactly. If it comes up against a big Char, if it comes up against a Matilda, it's probably in trouble too. But it's not built to do that.
It can run around them.
It can run around them. It can just leave, which is what it does. And for that reason, it's probably, I maintain it's the best Panzer of the war. Any German tank nerd wherever can fight me on that.
I would go with most significant. I think...
Obviously, I would argue the Tiger is more significant just because of the mental lexicon that it causes on people.
Yeah, now we need to define our terms. Yeah,
we do.
Tank number 3.
This is the spicy one. I maintain, because of the history of it, my favourite number 3 tank is the AC-4 Sentinel. The one with the 17-pound, the big 70-pounder gun.
It's not a real tank.
It's not. It's a prototype, but it's a real tank.
It could never have been a real tank. They couldn't get the gun fits in the turret, but there's no room for the crew.
There isn't.
I like the twin 25.
The twin 25 pounders. That's a better gun.
That looks cool. No, but I maintain the AC-4 had the potential to be amazing. It's just that it didn't have the funding. and it came at a time when...
Needed a different chassis and a different turret, I reckon.
I reckon they could have fixed it. Because, I mean, the stuff they do to get to the point where the AC-1 works is incredibly impressive. It's genuinely very, very impressive. The fact that this is a country that's never built a tank before, has very little experience operating them ourselves, because remember, the tanks Monash using are British tanks under his command.
With British crews under his command.
With British crews, yeah. The only experience we really have is playing around with the Vickers in, I think it was the 1920s, I think it was 23.
And the Bren gun carriers.
Yeah, and the Bren gun
Universal carriers, sorry.
Oh, you've upset people. But no, they managed to throw together this tank, which has 3 engines in it, arranged in a fun way, which is kind of fun when you look at it. The running gear looks great. It looks great. It's a French influence, but it looks great, and it works. And then they start to cast it in this incredible way to make it actually work. By all accounts, we shouldn't have been able to build a tank that worked.
The metallurgy of the casting was an astonishing achievement. Yeah. I would argue the fact that we had to build the world's first automatic fire extinguishing system indicates a lack of confidence in the power pack.
It does. But given what they were working with, it's really, really impressive that they managed to make this thing work. And I think the idea behind it, that it had to fight German tanks in North Africa, was stupid.
No, it had to fight Japanese tanks.
Yeah. And that was that was a lot of government influence that needed to bugger off. But if you put an AC-1 Sentinel up against a Japanese tank, 9 times out of 10, I'm putting my money on the Sentinel.
Yeah, I would completely agree that if a Japanese had established a beachhead in Queensland, I know they weren't going to, but if they had, a force of 50 Sentinels hitting that beachhead would have obliterated it.
Yeah. Or even in Port Moresby, put them in the streets of Port Moresby, Japan's going to be in a bit of trouble.
Yeah.
Because the Stuart itself performed incredibly well in the Philippines. The US just lacked a lot of tactics when it came down to stopping the Japanese suicide rushes with the anti-tank pogo stick things. That's it. Yeah, that's the word. So they struggled with that, and the Stuart also had some overheating issues. And of course, the Sentinel probably would have had those issues in far north Queensland or Port Moresby as well. But I maintain, you put 20 Sentinels in Port Moresby with the units to back them up, they're going to be hell for any Japanese unit trying to attack it.
I agree with you, and I know I've said as much in our Sentinel episode. I would note, though, that the Sentinel was never accepted into service, and no Sentinel was ever given an Australian Army vehicle registration number.
No, it wasn't.
And I think that is significant. But I take your point.
But at the same time, it makes sense that they didn't, because you've got the Lees and the Grants that are there, and you can just start to adopt them.
Which we also realised were awful and didn't want. But anyway, that's... I don't know.
I think they get more hate than they deserve for what they were and when they were built. And of course, we do some trials with the Shermans, but we never really adopt them, because by that point, there's no real point to adopt them. But
we go back to Matilda.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Matilda's better than the Sherman. Fight me, I will die on that hill. I like the Matilda more than I like the Sherman. Is it because I like it visually more? Maybe.
With the 90 mils close support version. Anyway.
I just like the look of the Matilda. Sure. It looks fantastic.
It does.
Early war period too, the Matilda was one of the few things that stopped a lot. Actually, if you look at the Matilda, the Valentine, the Cromwell, all the British tanks, Russia should write a thank you letter for keeping Moscow safe to the British for that.
Oh, well, we spoke to Tank Archives about that recently. There weren't too many Matildas there, but anyway.
No, but the Valentine in the USSR is immensely underappreciated.
Yes,
for what it does.
I agree with that.
The Valentine especially, the Valentine did a lot of heavy lifting on the Eastern Front in those early years. And it's largely forgotten about because the propaganda machine puts out the T-34 is the best things at sliced bread.
Did a lot of heavy lifting in North Africa too.
It did. Yeah. The Valentine is so underappreciated, and I love how it's built by like 7 guys in a shed. It's very British. Yeah, it's very British.
Although getting a Detroit diesel to power it helped a lot as well.
Yeah, it did. I mean, it's an example of how Allied cooperation works. Which is, again, why I love the Sentinel, because it's an example of someone trying to do something with no Allied cooperation.
We got the tracks.
We did get the tracks.
And
a lot of designs that we got sent, and we said, we can't build that here. We need something simpler.
And it's a case of a country that is completely gutted by something like this air disaster, that is completely gutted because most of its military is stuck in North Africa, that's never built a tank before, and it's turning around and churning out, by all accounts,
doesn't have an industrial manufacturing
to build this stuff. And by all accounts, it's producing a pretty good tank.
Now, we talked about this in our Sentinel episode. Do you know where we got the lathes to make the 2-pounder cannons in World War II?
I do, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
We dug it out of a scrapyard.
Yes.
In South Australia.
See, this is why I love the Sentinel.
It was buried underground.
This is why I love the Sentinel, because it's making do with what you can, and by all accounts, it's not bad. It's not the best thing ever. It's not a Panzer 38T. It's not a Matilda. It's not going to go up against a Panzer IV and win or a Stug. But if Japan rocks up with a couple Hargos, I'll put my money on the Sentinels.
Fair enough. Now, Chris,
Also, Big Gun looks cool.
That's that. As we wrap up, can you tell people where to find you and what the difference is between you and the other History of Everything?
Yeah, so for those wondering, there are 2 History of Everything channels on YouTube. One is a podcast, one is not a podcast. I'm not the podcast. It's kind of funny how it happens that we did a collab episode on his Spotify for his podcast about this. We both start at different times. So I started on Facebook, he started on TikTok. And we both had similar names. We didn't know each other existed. We started either within a few days of each other or on the same day. It was really, really close. We dated it back. But I moved to YouTube very, very quickly. And then I got really busy at work in finance because that used to be my job. Thank God it's not anymore. And then he moved over to YouTube as well. Saw my channel, saw I hadn't uploaded yet. And then made his channel because he thought, well, this guy's not uploading. It'll be fine. I then started uploading. And then I started gaining traction. And yeah, before long, we found out each other existed. And it was very much the meme of the 2 Spider-Men pointing at each other going, you exist. But we get along. We chat to each other. So we are completely different people. He's an American. I'm an Australian. That's probably the biggest difference when you notice the videos and the voices. He does a lot of geopolitics. I do a lot of other stuff. So we are different enough, but we are different people. But yeah, that's who we are. So if you look up History of Everything on YouTube, you got to look for the one with a H and an E on it with a blue circle in the middle. But I'll send you a photo to pop up.
I'll put a link in the thing. But also, you're the History of Everything channel.
Yes.
And he's the History of Everything podcast.
Yeah. So we're different enough. I also co-host the channel Lesser of Two Weevils with Rex's Hanger, who you may have heard of before. He does a lot of plane stuff. But we both have a bit of a special love for the Golden Age of Sail. In particular, stories that are often forgotten. Like I just did a large video 2-part series on the Dunbar disaster, which ran into the rocks at Sydney Heads. No one really remembers that. It's one of the worst disasters in history. And it's linked to Canberra specifically because the owners of the Tuggeranong homestead bought it at cheap auction off the guy who died in the Dunbar disaster after his death.
Oh, there we go.
No one knows that. And the manager at the Queanbeyan Railway store died on the Dunbar as well. And the member for Monero's family died on the Dunbar.
Right.
So it's very much linked to our lives. It's just that, again, it's so long ago and world wars happened since then, so we don't talk about it too much. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris, for
No, it's
coming
been a
and joining
pleasure.
us. And we'll see you folks again next time.